Welcome to Modern Financial Wellness, the podcast dedicated to helping you feel better about your finances. I'm your host, Jim Grace, and I'll be your guide as we discuss the psychology of money and explore the emotional aspects that shape our financial decisions and how we feel about them. A quick note before we start, although I do hope that you find the information on this show to be helpful, in no way are any of these discussions to be taken as specific financial advice. Please do your own research and talk to your own advisors, especially when making important financial decisions. All right, Erika Wasserman, your financial therapist. Thanks so much for joining me on Modern Financial Wellness. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have a great conversation or real conversation around money and emotions.
Yeah, it's a loaded topic. So I'm very grateful for your expertise and your time to help us unpack what comes with those two things. Before we jump in, do you want to just tell people a little bit about yourself and your business, who you are and what you do, and then we'll tackle it from there?
Yeah, sounds good. So like all of us, I've been on a roller coaster of life. Never met anybody with a flat, straight line. Not sure I ever want to meet somebody with a flat, straight line, right? This is why we have interesting stories and experiences. So my journey has been one of ups and downs and lefts and rights. I graduated from the University of Florida with a degree in finance, and math was fun and easy for me and something that I enjoyed. And I enjoyed it with my dad. Like, it was just something we talked about, sitting at the kitchen table, argued about, doing homework, but overall was something that came naturally to me. My mom and my sister, not so much. And as the years went on, I started trading stocks with him, and he became my financial accountability partner.
Oh, wow.
Really cool. Especially now as an adult, I see that that's not always the case across many families.
Can I ask you a quick question there? Because this is something that's come up recently with a client where I want to ask, did you feel that was a healthy relationship, that the conversations that you were having, the lessons you were learning from your father, was it comfortable for you to be having those conversations at that time? How was that experience when you were going through it?
Yeah, for me, it was super comfortable because it was natural. It was just something that I can remember being in fourth grade and, my prize for doing double math, what was it, double addition and things like that. So we were talking math in terms of, and then I got like a reward afterwards. And then as we started growing, he would be trading stocks and we'd start talking about the stock market. And then when I went to go buy my first car, we started having these conversations again. So because we started off small, and I'll give you a great example. And nowadays it's different. So I do different things with my kids, but we'd go to the grocery store and he'd take out his coins. Back in the day, the jiggling of, all my dad's coins in his pocket and cash at the grocery store. That's why I say we don't do this anymore. And he would say to me, go make change, right? And so I'd have to start doing math problems out in the world. And it rolled over and it started to grow as I grow. I do it differently with my kids nowadays because who carries cash?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it was very helpful having those conversations because I had a safe place to continue to create conversation and ask questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great to hear. So the particular case I'm thinking about had a father who was well-meaning and well-intentioned, but put a lot of pressure on it. And she wasn't comfortable with the math. She wasn't comfortable with the subject matter. And all she kind of really received was the pressure and the stress and the seriousness of, taking care of your money. So I was just interested in how you experienced that. And it's a interesting distinction, but I cut you off on your journey.
You did, but I want to echo on that a minute is because we all get our personal relationship with money from three things. One is our background, right? So for her background was money was stressful to her and it was taught to her in a stressful environment. And so that's her background. Add in religion. Money might be seen as greed or it doesn't buy happiness. Men are the ultimate decision makers. You give a certain amount to charity. That is messaging is passed down. And then your experiences. So if your experiences are positive, you do it again. Experience negative, you don't. I'll use a great example, and I keep using myself on this one. I had a horrible experience at the car dealership. I don't want to go back. My car light's on. I know I need to go back, and I keep driving around with it. It's for a sensor, so I know I can still drive the car, but I didn't like the feeling. And so I'm putting it off, which in the long run might cost me more money and more aggravation because every day I have to look at that stupid light. And this
it's like typical avoidance, right? Because it's going to be a negative emotional experience and you're just not dealing with it.
Right. And I have to put myself out there in an environment that I'm not comfortable in. And so we get our financial relationships the same way. So what you find is, so like with your client, her experience wasn't always so positive or didn't feel good. And so there might be some avoidance there. There might be some hoarding going on because that was the messaging that she received. And so spending might not feel good. And so, yes, so money is emotional and we get it from those three things.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad we fleshed that out right up front because I think it's going to have a big part of our longer conversation here and how that shows up with couples. But So you had a good experience with dad, you're trading stocks, and let's let you take it from there.
Yeah. So then, moved to New York City. Actually, I started working for IBM after I got my job, consulting. Moved to New York City, an apartment I couldn't afford with the new boyfriend who later became the husband. We bought our first house and moved overseas. So corporate America, got the opportunity to live in Japan for 2 years and China for a year.
Very cool.
Had my first daughter, moved back stateside, left my job, had 2 more kids. So I had 3 kids in 4 years and got divorced. So again, this roller coaster ride, we're going up, we're going down, we're going all sideways half the time. Difference was, and I moved back to Florida and, been here a decade now, over a decade, and discovered financial therapy shortly after my father passed away. And I knew what the money was about. My mom knew where the binder was. So she knew where the money was, but she didn't know what it was supposed to be for. That wasn't her role, traditional role in the marriage. And so I continue to help guide her in this. So along the line, I discovered financial therapy. And this was my big aha moment. Where I was like, I know nothing about cars, but I know how to have a positive conversation about money that can help others.
Right.
So all of those twists and turns that I talked about in life, merging money when I moved in, expanding money when I had children, separating money when I got divorced, inheriting money with my father, right? The difference was I was in the driver's seat. I was in control through all of those shifts. The difference, what I was seeing around the people around me was without a strong sense of finances, their opportunity and options were different. And the feeling of self-defeat kept coming through. So when I discovered financial therapy, I went to Kansas State and I got a graduate certificate in financial therapy. I then joined the Financial Therapy Association. I was one of the first 15 to be certified. And now there are over 70 certified financial therapists in the country and growing every day because this is a topic that's so taboo to talk about, but yet it impacts literally every part of our relationship to the day we die and afterwards when we start talking about estate planning.
Right. So you've lived it, you've experienced it, but at the same time, we're very well prepared and had a really healthy relationship and education and lessons that you learned from your father. And therefore, you've dealt with 2 of the big ones, these big transition life events of divorce and loss, and felt like you were in a spot to really take care of that. And then we're able to transition that into your next career, next chapter of your life, which is helping others through financial therapy. Absolutely.
And that was it. That was my purpose. And again, know nothing about cars. I'm not going to be a great runner, but I can have a conversation about money. So awesome. I'm glad that I could put my skills to use to help others that did not grow up with that background or have the confidence to ask questions. They're scary sometimes because we've never done it and we don't see it modeled. So what happens, again, I'll use the car analogy. I know nothing about cars. I've never been under a car. How am I supposed to know what questions to ask of what's wrong with my car? The same with money. We don't skill our kids, our adults, in the world to ask those right questions or any questions at all.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about money. You've mentioned 2 big life events that are impactful. They come up, they're disruptive, divorce and losing somebody you love. But I think in getting to know you, I think we also spend a certain amount of both of our time working with the same types of folks who are just busy, successful people, right? Who have a lot going on and they have different roles within their household. They're running businesses, they're having kids, their parents are getting older. There's just demands on their time and their attention and their emotional needs regularly. I'm squarely in this camp myself.
Me too.
So yeah, I appreciate the admission. I think we all are, right? And so I think it's obvious that there might be some challenges when something big happens, like a divorce or somebody is lost. But I think all of us could benefit from thinking about some of these things. How do we kind of get to the table and start having a healthy relationship with money? So I guess when you work with couples that we've described and kind of use them as an avatar, what are some of the challenges that come up most often? What do you see as kind of being some common hurdles to get over when we at least start to try to get to the table?
Yeah. So the first hurdle is there's not a single person that has the same background, religion, and experiences than you. Even in your home, if you look at your siblings, you interpret things differently, your experiences are differently. And so now all of a sudden you are partnered, a life partner with somebody who has different background, potentially religion, and experiences. I'll ask you this question because most of you are married couples out here. I'll ask our listeners. So how long did it take you to say, I love you to your partner? Jim, how about you?
God, you're going to put me on the spot. She's going to listen to this. It took a while. Probably within the first year. I think we were saying that when we were dating.
Okay. So,
but I will find out though, after the fact, when this is released, I'll know for certain. But I think it was probably within the first year. We got pretty serious.
10 to 12 months, let's say.
Right.
Okay. On average, it's 5 months to say, I love you. Well, wow. Again, yeah, some people are saying it after 5 days and some people are saying it after 5 years, right? So The average is 5 months. How long did it take for you to share your credit card, your credit score, your student loans, or any debt that you had, or your salary even with your partner?
It was years after that. Yeah, much longer. Yeah.
So, and again, back to your listeners, think about that. So the average is 9 months. And again, I've been asking these questions for years, and a lot of people come up with never. I've been married for 20 years. My wife has no idea what my salary is, And I should clarify,
there's probably a general amount of conversation that we're having about money, but we're not getting into our statements. We're not looking at what any of it means, right? So I might have known how much money she was making and vice versa, or, obviously what we're spending money on, but we weren't having meaningful conversations about money and really getting into the details until much later in our relationship.
Right. And so now you have somebody who you love. You are so in love, right? You've said, I love you. You're living together maybe, and you've all this, togetherness, but you haven't talked about a major topic in your life, which is finances. And especially as you go buy a house, you have children, you have aging parents where the demands are different, but guess what? So is your background, religion, and experiences. So what I find, the number one thing that couples come to me on, and I do couple sessions, is they don't understand each other because they haven't taken the time to learn how to communicate of what's important to them in their financial values. And one of the questions that I ask is, what does your partner spend on that annoys you? And so I'll give a great example. I recently had a couple go through this, and he said, she buys plants. I don't understand. She buys plants. It just annoys me every time she buys a plant. Okay. So we talked about it. And I said, well, why do you like buying plants? And her response was, I used to live in New York City. I didn't have a balcony. So therefore I could never have a plant. I enjoy earth and plants. And, for me, now that we live in a place where I can have plants, it's a sign of success. So her buying a plant isn't about the extra $50, or I don't even know how much a plant is because I have a black thumb. But for her, that was something that added value to her life. Her partner didn't understand. So sometimes it's breaking down and asking some different questions and learning about what's really important to your partner and why. And the why is a big thing.
Yeah, I've lived that myself. So as a financial planner, I'm studying our budget pretty regularly. I'm studying our spending. And one of the things that used to annoy me was my wife would spend blocks of time working from a restaurant for lunch or a coffee shop in the morning. And I would always circle those things and identify them as maybe that's a place that we can cut if we're trying to save money or reallocate our resources. But the more experience that I got in kind of this emotional side of money and thinking about those things, and COVID forcing us to all work remote, what it came down to is that's really some of the only time she's out of the house during the week, right? And to get out of the house, relocate, have a cup of coffee or a lunch and get some work done, filled her up, gave her some energy. And it wasn't until we had that conversation did I feel more comfortable saying, all right, well, that's something we just need to include in how we're going to spend money moving forward because it's meaningful to her. So I'm glad that we talked about that. And can you just go a little bit further? What do some of those questions look like? How do we start to understand each other a little bit better when we're thinking about who our partner is and where they come from? How do you coach your clients on that?
Yeah. So one of the questions that came to me, just like you're asking, is I don't even know how to start the conversation. So what I did is I created a deck of cards. So these are 50 conversation cards called Let's Talk Finances. This is the couples edition. It's available on Amazon because we don't know how to start the questions. So this gamifies it a little bit where you can pick a card or two to say, tell me your background growing up without using the words upper, middle, or lower class. And all of a sudden you're storytelling, and we relate better when we storytell. I couldn't go on the field trip because my parents couldn't afford it. Or my mom was always the room mom and paid for the snacks, right? So all of a sudden you're sharing how you grew up, and then it understands why maybe you splurge at the Dollar Tree or for your kids, parties or things like that, because that's what your experiences were. So these are just small examples. Some of the questions also is, what's your favorite bill to pay?
What do you hear when you ask that question? What are some of your favorite answers?
Oh, it varies. It varies. Favorite bill to pay could be anything from my monthly massage, right? Because it makes me happier. Mine personally, when my kids were younger, was my nanny because it allowed me to be a human. So I would rather shift spend and pay her because that made me feel good. Now, as a single mom with 3 kids, mine is my mortgage. Because I paid every month. My kids have lived in the same house for 12 years. And so for me, it feels good. So when you start identifying what feels good to you and your money is energy, you start aligning. And so for other people, you want to feel good about where your money is going. So start thinking about what your favorite bill is. And by the way, start thinking about your least favorite bill and how do you reduce that?
So we want to understand ourselves a little bit better, right? We want to get to the table, start having conversations with folks. When going back to the dates, right, that you said, I love you. And when people start talking about money, what's your recommendation or suggestion for folks? When should you start having these conversations?
As soon as possible, right? As you're getting to know somebody, start asking some questions. And you don't have to be as direct as what's your credit score, but you can be as well as you're looking at, oh, I want to buy a new car. I'm looking at a car and, but it's a 0 interest rate, or what's your interest rate? Like you can start kind of slowly integrating some of these conversations in here. Like retirement's really important to me. So I started retirement account early. What does that look like for you? And they might say, I haven't paid for retirement. Nobody told me about it. I was just with a client yesterday who was saying, nobody taught me to invest in retirement. So when I got my first job, I needed all the money. I was a school teacher. So I was living in the now. I wasn't thinking about putting the money away and nobody told me. I didn't have anybody to have conversations with. So I think that's the other thing is when somebody gives you feedback of where they are, maybe ask, well, why? Why has that happened? Because it might be, that's all I knew.
Right. I thought of the question I wanted to ask you is creating the space for this conversation to take place. What's a healthy time and place for these conversations? Because I feel like if we go back to who we're talking about, we're all busy. We're all up to our eyeballs in life. We have a lot coming on at us, lots of demands. And I find sometimes that I'm interested in it. It's my profession. So I will be guilty sometimes of not forcing, but bringing up this topic when it's just absolutely not the right time, right? Because both of us aren't in a good headspace. We've got other demands. Do you have any suggestions or ideas to how to create a healthy space for these conversations?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a few. The first one is schedule it. Schedule it like you would any other business plan that you have or business meeting. Look, we're going to do some financial meetings once a month or every other week. What time works best for you? Well, let's do Sunday morning while the kids are watching cartoons. We'll get a cup of coffee and we'll go sit out back. Cool, right? Or Tuesday night with a glass of wine, is generally at 9:00 after our favorite show, or the reward is we get to watch an episode of our favorite show after we spend 30 minutes and block the time. Also, write down the question that you want to answer that period. So just like you would for a business meeting, have an agenda. Don't start throwing 18 different conversations. So we're headed into the summer right now. So maybe it's talking about summer spending. What is that going to look like? Kids are in camp. Will those expenses change? You might need to work from the coffee shop more because the kids are home. So the expenses might change. We're going to be spending on vacation. Where can we shift money? So I really believe in shifting money. I don't like the word budget. I like yes plans.
Neither do I.
Right?
Yes
so
plans.
What do you want to say yes to this summer? So when we start saying yes to things, we're able to say no to others. So yes, we're going to go on a week vacation. Cool. But does that meet our yes plan while we're standing at Target checking out?
Right.
Friends invite us over or out for dinner and the babysitter and everything else. Is that going to get us to our yes? If it does, great. If it doesn't,
right.
Shift your mindset.
Yeah.
Back to having the conversation though, here's a couple other tips. Sometimes having that face-to-face conversation is challenging. Looking at your partner, vulnerability, feel of maybe rejection or embarrassment car rides are amazing. Hey, let's go for a car ride, or over the summer when you're out on a ride, you're sitting shoulder to shoulder. So the vulnerability is a little bit different. And
wow, that's an interesting idea.
Grab the deck of cards, right? You can make it part of the road trip too, and add in some questions while you're going, or pre-write some questions ahead of time that you want to ask. But again, the car ride, the side to side really works out well.
Yeah, that's great. Because it makes a lot of sense, right? Scheduling some time, being consistent with it, being organized and having an agenda, knowing what you're going to talk about, just like you would a business meeting or anything else you have to tackle.
Or even a doctor's appointment, right? You're going to go in with,
right.
I want these questions when you go to the cardiologist. Right. And when you go to your GP, it's going to be a different list of questions. The same thing with the meeting for finances.
But I love the idea of changing the physical space, because sometimes there are some people that I work with just sitting down face to face and having this conversation about finances itself feels overwhelming, right? So just to be able to change that physical space, I think is a really cool idea.
Yeah. And the last one is for all of our couples out there, and you can use this in other areas. I'll give you permission, is come up with a code word. So anything from palm tree to bananarama. I mean, you can come up with whatever word you want. But the idea is you and I both know when we get into a fight or we're in a discussion, we'll call it not even a fight yet, it's not going to go anywhere. Nobody's going to be heard and we're headed south. And come up with a code word to use. But when you come up with the code word, also come back with how you're coming back to the conversation. So, for example, some of my clients do a 10-minute timer. One of them's in charge of setting the timer for 10 minutes. The other does a walk around the block. So now all of a sudden you're changing scenery again, getting your endorphins going. And I have one, they're an adorable couple. One of the things that bothered her was he was always buying stuff on Instagram. So I said, okay, what's going to be your callback? And she goes, well, we have a dance button. So there's like like the Staples button, there's a button that you hit and everybody has to stop in the house and do a dance. And so the funny thing is oh my God, I need that. Where'd you get it? She goes, Instagram. So we're putting his
Of course.
We're putting his Instagram spending to use, and they have to hit the dance button and do a dance and then come back. So
awesome.
A code word is really important, and to be able to be exercised and respected. So come back to that conversation.
Right. Yeah, that's another great idea, because oftentimes you end up with a situation where at best you're just kind of agreeing to disagree and moving away, but not really getting back and solving anything or working through it. Right. So being able to take a break, I think that's another great idea. Thank you for that. I wanted to ask you about the yes plan a little bit. So it sounds like the yes plan might be a good way to start to connect the dots between how you're spending money and the things that you're talking about being important to you.
Yes.
And that's something that I see a lot. Oftentimes on my side, we're sitting down with a couple and we get into spending and cash flow, and it becomes this exercise of measuring what they're spending on money on and maybe saying we need to do things differently, but it's disconnected from the things that are important, the things that are meaningful, the things that we truly want to be spending our money on. And that seems like this yes plan is a good way to kind of connect those two dots. Could you, do you have any other thoughts on that or any other comments you can make for us on the yes plan?
Yeah. So for me, a yes plan also gets both of you on the same page. What are we agreeing to say yes to? And because we have young families or families in the audience, is a yes plan could be a yes to buying a home. It also could be a yes to a summer vacation. And I'll give a great example is when you start saying yes to things, I also encourage you to come up with a visual for it. See it. So put a picture up of it. So if it's that new home or it's that vacation to Ireland, put a picture of it and start talking about it. Going back to conversations of background, talk about it with your kids. There's a great way to get a family involved in getting to your yes and I have several families that do this, is they want to go on vacation. They want to go to Ireland, let's say, and it's going to cost $10,000. Family of 4, probably more, but let's just go with that.
It's good to have a goal. Yeah.
And they want to go next summer. So what they did does a chart, and they're going to color in the country of Ireland. They can color in a thermometer to reach that goal of $10,000 because they're going to say yes to go to Ireland. So anytime they're at the grocery store, they're out shopping, the kids want to go out to eat. The question is, does this align to our yes plan? And if it does, great. Absolutely. If it doesn't, let's do this instead tonight. Move that money over right away. So move that $50, move that $20 and color it in. If you're wanting to get the younger kids involved, all of a sudden asking for all the toys and the crayons and all that kind of stuff, when they see the adventure they're going to go on, they're going to put that toy back and let them come in and color that $5 or $20, right, that they just saved. And everybody starts working towards the yes plan.
Wow. Yeah, I love that on so many levels, especially getting the kids involved is, again, a healthy lesson about where you're going to spend money, what resources you have. But I just think that it's a good way to avoid the budgeting conversation that I see most often, which is just an exercise in you and I of telling our partner that they're doing something wrong, right? You need to spend less. I need to do something a little bit differently, and not aligning the things that are going to be most meaningful and make that family the most happy. So I love the yes plan a lot. I
equate a budget to a diet.
Right.
Short term, gonna rebel at some point and generally end off in a worse situation than before I started. Where a yes plan to me is a lifestyle. So it's about shifting. So if you love live music, great. Let's go live music. I love live music. But I might be going to the concert in the park or the $20 ticket at a local, smaller theater than spending $1,000 for concert ticket. And then that extra money I'm able to shift into my yes plan.
Love it.
Without denying myself what brings me joy on a smaller day-to-day basis.
Right. So that's fantastic. So we've talked about getting to know our partner a little bit better, having those conversations as soon as possible. We kind of started in the space of challenges that you see. Are there any other, besides not knowing where our partner is coming from, what are some of the other challenges that you see in your practice that are common amongst busy, couples with kids?
I'm going to hit 2 and I'll let you pick which one or both we can talk about. The first one is estate planning.
Okay.
Super uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people. But now that you have children, the importance of estate planning, life insurance, and sitting down together and making those phone calls to an attorney, sitting down together and building out the plan also takes communication and commitment in our busy days. And so, half things fall off my list. It's how do you get that back on your list and make sure it's updated? Yep. So that's really important. And the other one is aging parents.
Okay.
Back to our background, religion, and experiences. People have different beliefs on how and where they support their parents.
With huge financial impact.
Huge financial impact.
Right. Let's start there. And I do want to talk about the estate planning piece, but let's dig into that a little bit. So again, in this demographic, my wife and I, our parents are both in their 70s and getting older. What do you commonly start to talk to your clients about with aging parents? What are they facing and how do they start those conversations?
Yes, to all of it. I'm also in a similar situation. So it's about having open conversations with your parents that you probably have never had before. So there's 2 major conversations that happen here. One is with your parents of where are the documents? Are they updated? Is there anything that I need to know? Because if not, I'm going to be digging through your drawers and I don't want to do that. And you don't want me to do that, right? We want
while grieving, right? You're hunting on a scavenger hunt, looking for forms you don't understand and statements while you're supposed to be spending some time grieving and working through loss, right? Terrible time to be hunting down documents.
Exactly. So that's a good conversation to say, look, I'd like to set up some time with you because at some point, and what I do with my mom is also, by the way, here's my information, right? So here's where my stuff is kept. So it's not just a one-way conversation. It's like, listen, I went to the estate planner. Here's every year I update my document. I put it in a safe. This is where it is. So it's a two-way conversation also. I think it was important for me that she felt trusted with my information as much as she trusted me with hers.
Right.
So that's one way of going about it. But having those conversations, and if your parents aren't ready, then make some suggestions, or can I schedule an appointment for you? Maybe they don't know who to ask. And again, this is a conversation that they haven't had before. So I would start with there on a high level is just say, are you prepared? Where is this? Is it updated? If not, how can I support you in this? Can I make some phone calls? Because in the long run, it's going to help you. So That's a good starting place. With your partner, it's a very different conversation. With your partner, and especially if you're married and you have kids at this point, is what is your feelings of supporting adult parents? Adult family members. It could be an uncle, it could be anybody. And hear them out and then ask why. Because the reasoning could be important or not important, right? But it has an importance to them. And then ask the question of, well, how much is that going to take, or how much do we need to allocate in your dreams, right? And in your wishes, and find out the number. So you're having clear communication. Then go back and look at your numbers and say, yes, that can work, or no, that can't work.
Right.
And I have clients that go into debt taking care of their parents because they don't have clear communication. So a parent, especially first generation, right? A parent will say, I need a ticket to Dominican Republic and it's going to cost $1,000 because I'm leaving on Tuesday. And it's expected that they pay for the plane ticket for their parents to go back to their home country.
And that gets back to knowing who your partner is, where they come from, their experience, what's expected of them culturally, right? All that communication that we talked about up front.
Right. And the conversation then to that person back to their parents is, I will support flying home, right? But there is a $500 cap on plane tickets, or $1,000 for the year that I can do. So having some clear boundaries is helpful for everybody. Again, might be really uncomfortable in the beginning, but this is what I can afford to do, and I want to help and support you.
Boundaries. I'm glad this came up. I want to click in on that term, boundaries, a little bit, and maybe a great context. What's your experience like? What do you see with the clients that you're working with on establishing healthy boundaries? We just touched on it a little bit in this idea of putting a cap on certain things, but let's assume most people want to be supportive of their spouse or their partner and obviously respectful of their family. How does if there's a disagreement about what those boundaries should look like, what is a healthy conversation about it? What is an example of that in a healthy way?
Let's go back again. Let's use diet as a word and lifestyle. And we have boundaries around food. You have some people that say I'm completely gluten-free. We have some people that are dairy-free. We have some people, right? We have people who eat dessert every night of the week, and we have people who eat dessert once a month, right? And there's something in between. So everybody's boundaries are also going to look different. The difference is we have very often clear boundaries in what we eat with nutrition.
Right.
We have boundaries of how often we work out or how much weight we're going to put on our workouts, right? Lifting. With finances, we often don't have boundaries put in place because we haven't been taught them and we don't know how to talk about them. And nobody's asked you, what is your boundary around loaning money to a friend? So when you start putting some boundaries in place up front, the conversations get a little clearer. Now, when they don't align, it's again about the why. It's about understanding what's important to you and what you're willing to shift. So listen, my boundary is I want to support my parents $1,000 a month, not $1,500, not $500. It's $1,000. Okay, great. With that $1,000, we need to move $500 from somewhere else to accommodate your goal with your family and my goal with my family. So how are we going to shift? So you can make it a priority And it might come out to 800 and 800, right? But it's having those conversations and agreeing together. I had a client who we did a worksheet to find out their spending, and they were overspending. And I said, sit down together, see where you wanted to shift. And they came back and you just zeroed out line items. And I met with them and I said to her, did you agree on this? And she goes, no, because it wasn't worth the fight. It saved hours of conversation. And I said, but you understand, because you both didn't agree to this, this is not lasting.
Right. We've just kicked the can down the road on something potentially, I'd imagine, more serious, which is some kind of conflict about it.
And he had an aha moment in that moment. And he goes, I missed the assignment. Yes, right. You did. These are hard conversations because we're uncomfortable. We haven't had them before.
Yeah. Especially, I think of the bigger example within aging parents is where they're going to live. And I've seen that where I have a couple and one spouse or partner has just come to the table without even much thought that if mom or dad get older and sick, that they could come live with us. And that is exactly the opposite of what the other spouse or partner had in mind. And they just haven't talked about it, but now they have to start to make these decisions and unpack these conversations. And that's more than just a huge financial commitment, a huge emotional, physical commitment to have an aging parent or family member in your home. So just like everything else, it sounds like the sooner we can start to have these conversations, understand what we will or won't agree to, what our boundaries are, it's just, makes total common sense to start having these conversations now.
And I'll use that as a great example and maybe it's, why are you hesitant to move dad into the home? And be honest about it, because I lose my privacy because of this. Okay, how do we make it that you don't lose your privacy? Again, set up a boundary. Dad doesn't come out of his room after 8 o'clock at night. And, right? I mean, there's ways we go away at 1 month a weekend where it's just us. There's ways to get creative when you have conversation and in problem solving mode. Relate this back to work. If somebody came in and just said, I'm doing it this way and we have to get this done, the rest of the team doesn't jump on board and meet the deadline and exceed. You need to get buy-in. You need to get collaboration. You need to get conversation. And it's the same with financial decisions.
Yeah. Real quick, I just want to jump over the estate planning topic, if you don't mind, because I think it's an interesting space to think about tough conversations because no one wants to think about dying or getting older, quite frankly. That's probably a bigger one. But for this conversation, if we just think about passing away and all the things we need to get done just to practice good financial hygiene and having an estate plan, guardianship is the other thing that I think comes up oftentimes with couples that I talk to. It's very difficult, especially if they both come from supportive families, to decide who gets our kids, who's going to take care of our kids. And that's often where I see a disagreement that leads to them not getting the plan in place, which is probably at the end a problem, right? So,
well, then they become custody of the state and then it's worse.
Right. So in thinking about being vulnerable and having a tough conversation and needing to face that, do you have any tips for clients that are entering or should be doing some estate planning, but maybe having a difficult time communicating about it? Is there anything there you want to share?
Yeah. As far as the guardianship, which is a big one, but everybody changes also. So who you pick today might not be who's available in 2 years or 5 years. And so knowing that this is decision today doesn't mean it's going to be your forever decision. And maybe that's a little bit helpful in these conversations because the cousin or the sister that lives down the street today might not be in a situation 3 to 5 years from now. And so it can change. And so leave that open is, yes, we're going to go with X family member today, but we were going to revisit this in 3 years, or we're going to revisit this if her life situation changes, and both agree on that. I think that will be helpful also. Also with estate planning, it's not just about death and dying in your 70s. I had a client in their 30s have overnight a tragic event happen and became paralyzed, right? Breathing tube, 3 small kids. They happen to have the power of attorney, the health benefit all done. And here's where it got interesting. The mother and the wife didn't agree on the treatment.
Oh, wow.
But because the health documents were in place for the wife to make the decisions, she was able to make the decisions.
Right. Right. And that's a huge one. I'm glad you shared because unless you've experienced that, and it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And the famous case is Terry Schiavo in Florida many, many years ago was on life support, and it became this battle between husband and family. And those things, it's important to have your wishes laid out ahead of time, agree to them, and get those things in place, isn't it?
It is. And again, these are things that when you're young and healthy, you don't think about, but you need to. And especially if you have young family members, right? Little kids running around, you want to make it as easy for everybody involved. So take the time, put it on your list, and make sure that you start your estate plan as soon as possible if you haven't, and or make sure it's updated because people around us, their lives have changed just like ours have.
Right, right. So some sound financial advice from Erika in this conversation about broader financial well-being. It'll help you feel better. So we've had a wide-ranging conversation, which I really appreciate because I think there's a lot of rabbit holes I love to pick your brain about when it comes to couples and money and emotion and everything. Is there anything else you'd like to share for our avatar of the professional, successful couple who's just busy and has a lot going on? Are there any other tips you love, tricks you like to introduce to those folks besides the cards, obviously, which we'll definitely spotlight? Is there anything else you would want to leave us with before I let you go?
Yeah, listen, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes with money. We all do. Everybody from the ultra rich to the ultra poor, right? Just like with their eating, you were going to splurge once in a while and have, the extra cake or an extra glass of wine, whatever, right? The same with money. So like if you get off track for a day, a week, a month, you can get right back on. So forgive yourself, move on, maybe even laugh about it, to be like, I cannot believe we just spent all that money at dinner last night. But we had such a great time and we're going to pay the bill for it and move on and probably not do that for another year or two. Right. So take that moment and just say, yeah, I really messed up, but that's okay because I can get back on track. And just know that with money, you can get back on track. It's a math equation. You can increase income, decrease spend. And by talking about it and aligning with your values, you could still do it and live a full life.
I love it. That's been great. A couple of final questions related to this topic or not. Are there any books that you'd recommend that you really love, other podcasts that you're listening to that are tackling some of these things that you think might be helpful to spotlight for folks? Of course, we're going to spotlight the new card game, and I would encourage anybody to check that out. It's on Amazon, like Erika said. Any other resources that you might want to put out into the world for us to link to that people can check out?
So for resources, Cash Flow Cookbook is a great one by Gordon Stein.
Okay, cool.
It's like a recipe to how to reduce some of your spending, areas to look at, things that maybe your parents didn't teach you that is out there. So that's a great resource. As far as other great podcasts, there's so many. Which is great. The conversation just keeps growing on this topic. So just keep listening. I also would recommend a board of directors. Is have a bunch of people and resources that you use to bounce ideas off of. So if it's a financial person, a legal person, a chef that you have in your network, right? I call them my board of directors because not one person's going to have all the answers. And by the way, your partner doesn't have all the answers because they are very successful in one area of business and you might be in another. Well, that carries too. There's so much in the world that we don't know. So get yourself a board of directors of trusted resources that you can bounce ideas off of, ask questions, and not be embarrassed. Or if you're embarrassed, at least laugh about it with them.
Yeah, that's all great advice. I'm glad we wrapped on that as far as resources, because that's what it's all about, right? Just helping each other, sharing resources, learning from one another. Such a great idea with the board of directors. Final question or two. This is a show about financial well-being. Well-being overall. Are there any habits, rituals, routines, things that you do that just make you feel better and help you kind of deal with some of the difficult conversations and everything that we just talked about?
Music makes everything better. So if you have ADHD and you want to do your finances, set a music timer. So create a theme song, get a hype song, awesome. grab some music. It makes it great. And also, like anything else, a great habit is look at it. Look at your money. Open up your statements. And if that's a big step for you, great. And then once a week, put it in your calendar that you're just going to look at the money. For some people, just opening up the accounts is overwhelming. And then as you get into it, you're able to do more and more. So just like, I say I don't like running, right? The first time you run a block, the second time you can run a block and a half and you start building. It's the same with your relationship with finances, is start off small and build sustainable habits that you can grow off of.
That's awesome. What is your favorite song, your pump up song when you're going to open your statements and deal with your money? Do you have a fire up song that you go to?
Roar. Katy Perry, Roar.
Oh, got you. Awesome.
Yeah, cool. That song gets me hyped. I can do this. We got this, kind of.
We got this.
Yes.
Awesome. Very cool. Last question, then we'll let you go. Where do people check you out? Any websites, socials, anything you want to spotlight for us before we say goodbye?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way of reaching me is on my website, which is yourfinancialtherapist.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Your Financial Therapist, and the cards Let's Talk Finances Couples Edition is available on Amazon.
Great branding, by the way, for the business name. Yes. Congratulations on that. Erika, thank you so much. Again, I think I just felt like I scratched the surface on all of these things. You're such an amazing resource for us to explore all things couple and money and emotion. So thank you so much for your time and expertise. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time.